everyone. My name is Joy Restoven, and I am the Executive Director at Survive It. Today, we're going to talk about a couple of things that you might see on your report from Foundation Medicine, Tempest, anyone that's doing a comprehensive genomic profiling test for you. And they're coming online. The science is pretty exciting in the sense that they can give you a better idea of treatment options, how effective a treatment may or may not be for you. And so today, to speak to these things, we have Dr. Prasanth Reddy from Foundation Medicine joining us. Dr. Reddy, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Joy. It's great being here.
So let's start with microsatellite instability. If you could just run through, what it is, a high level of what it is and what it means for cancer patients.
Definitely, Joy. So microsatellite instability is one mechanism by which we can detect if you as a patient has a problem with how you repair DNA. Specifically, it's called mismatch repair deficiency. And so when you hear mismatch repair deficiency and microsatellite instability, we're talking about the same thing, okay? So one of the ways we can assess for mismatch repair deficiency or microsatellite instability is immunohistochemistry. Another way is by PCR. And then the last way is through comprehensive genomic profiling. And so comprehensive genomic profiling has been looked at as a different mechanism to determine whether or not somebody is microsatellite unstable or has mismatch repair deficiency or not. The reason why it's important is for folks that have this issue in repairing their DNA, they're going to have more mutations. And that's one of the reasons why it may be easier for the immune system to detect patients that have these mismatch repair deficiency problems. Their cancer cells are not me, and they're easier to recognize because they have more mutations. And so as part of that process, the question is, can we use that biomarker, microsatellite instability, to decide whether or not I should go on immunotherapy or not? And the answer is yes. So in May 2017, after a number of clinical trials, pembrolizumab got the first tumor-agnostic therapeutic indication. What does that mean? It means it doesn't matter whether you had breast cancer or lung cancer or prostate cancer or any solid tumor. What it meant was if you had any of those solid tumors and you were in the second-line metastatic setting, and you had microsatellite instability high status, you were a great candidate to go on pembrolizumab. And that's, again, why the FDA approved pembrolizumab in May of 2017 for patients that had this microsatellite instability high status. It represents a number of patients, potentially upwards of 20,000 patients a year that could benefit from knowing their microsatellite instability status. Some of that data was published in the journal Science in 2017. And so the other amazing thing about folks that could benefit from this kind of treatment approach is that some folks that go on immunotherapy have a durable response, meaning that that's just another code word for potential cure. Now, is that everybody? The answer is no. Right? But it does appear for some of these folks that go on immunotherapies that perhaps 5%, maybe more, of patients could have a durable response, meaning that they have a fantastic response that's sustained. In cancers that historically have been not good cancers, certainly in cancers where folks have failed, several of the standard of care regimens. So that's fantastic news, right? And it impacts a lot of patients because it's tumor agnostic. That means regardless of the site of origin, you could get benefit from, immune checkpoint inhibitors if you're microsatellite instability high, okay? So I would say, should everybody be tested for it? I would say if you're getting comprehensive genomic profiling, it's going to be part of that value add of why you're testing, so it makes it easier. But certainly in certain cancers, it's a no-brainer. You have to be tested for it, like colorectal cancer, endometrial cancer, gastric cancer. There's a handful of what we call Lynch cancer-related syndrome or related cancers that I would definitely test for microsatellite instability. But given the pembrolizumab indication, you could really make a strong argument, regardless of what cancer type you have, you should get tested.
That's great. And so you mentioned having a high status. Does everyone gauge that the same?
So that's a tricky question. And so the answer is no. And so because of the Lynch cancer syndrome, there are existing ways that we can assess for mismatch repair, deficiency, or microsatellite instability. So the simplest way is you can do IHC tests, actually, where you're actually looking to see if at the protein expression level, there's no protein that's expressed when you do this IHC stain, right? So that's one way you can do it. Then you can also do PCR, and PCR is specifically looking for this microsatellite instability, okay, which is kind of the end product of when you have mismatch repair. You have these microsatellites, long repeated segments of DNA, like A, or AT. And what happens is that part of that long repeated segment gets an incorrect letter inserted into the DNA, and that leads to basically mutations that lead to non-functional proteins, okay? And that's essentially what a microsatellite that's unstable or unstable is. And it's because you have an incorrect repair of that DNA when you get these changes, right? And so you can test for that using PCR. Those are different than using comprehensive genomic profiling. So comprehensive genomic profiling is also looking at DNA sequences, but it's looking for longer DNA sequences to see whether or not there's a problem with microsatellites. It's a different way of looking at microsatellite instability as opposed to the PCR-based tests. The bottom line is that even within comprehensive genomic profiling, which homopolymer region you're going to look at, how long it is, some of those details are probably not relevant, but it does vary. And so it really goes back to this concept of not all tests are the same. And so when you say you're going to do a test, you know, you should be confident that you're going to get an accurate result, right? So again, when folks are saying, gosh, if I had microsatellite instability testing and I go talk to my doctor, that's a conversation to have with the doctor to say, how confident do you feel that the testing we ran is actually going to detect microsatellite instability?
And then you also mentioned that the FDA approved pembrolizumab. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, pembrolizumab, yes.
It's also known as Keytruda. Since the FDA approved it, is it safe to assume that every cancer center is testing MSI to see if Keytruda would be an option?
You know, unfortunately, the answer to that question is no, right? And I certainly would encourage folks to look to see whether their microsatellite, you know, have that microsatellite instability high status, right? So one of the challenges is what's the likelihood that someone's going to have a microsatellite instability high status, right? So it may not be a ton of folks, but if you happen to be that person that has that microsatellite instability high status, that is a really big deal. And so that is the challenge. And so a lot of centers don't routinely test unless it's for specific cancers, in particular the Lynch-related cancers like we talked about earlier, the colorectals, the gastrics, the endometrial cancer, et cetera. But in many cases, folks aren't being tested. And given the pembrolizumab indication, the Keytruda indication from 2017, I certainly think in the right setting, it absolutely should be tested, right? And separate from that, again, making sure that when you do the test, you're confident that you're getting a test where you can trust the result.
Thanks for clearing that up. So if you're unclear, if you don't see it on your pathology report, ask your doctor if they tested for that, and if they did not, we've provided a link below where you can get that testing. So let's move on to tumor mutational burden. What is it, and what does that mean for cancer patients?
So tumor mutational burden is essentially at the simplest level, if I look at, say, an amount of DNA, how many mutations exist within that amount of DNA? Another way to kind of quantify that is mutations per megabase of DNA, okay? And just like microsatellite instability, the concept is rather straightforward in the sense that the more mutations that I have, the more likely that I, as a cancer cell, will be recognized as being foreign or not me by the immune system. And so can we take advantage of that and then say we can boost a person's immune system to then go fight their own cancer? And the answer to that question is we can. So across a number of tumor types, lung cancer, melanoma, colorectal cancer, bladder cancer, and the list is ever expanding, we now know that folks do have some benefit if they have a high tumor mutational burden where they could actually get benefit from immune checkpoint inhibitors. So these are things like nivolumab, pembrolizumab, atezolizumab, et cetera. They're immune checkpoint inhibitors. And so it adds another tool into your toolbox to consider when you're comparing, should I go with the standard of care or should I think a little bit outside of the box, either on or off clinical trial, in deciding what I should do next.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so again, if this is something that you are not seeing on your pathology report, we've provided a link below so that you can print out the requisition form, take it to your doctor and say, this is something that I'd like to look into to see if it's an option for me and it affects my treatment options.
Yep, definitely, Joy. And the same thing as we said for microsatellite instability, sometimes the definitions of tumor mutational burden are not always the same from company to company. So when you have this conversation with your doctor, just ensure that there's confidence that when they do get a tumor mutational burden number back, it's something that you can trust and work off of. That's the only other thing I would say.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. I know there's so much information coming at cancer patients and caregivers. We want to highlight the things that are important and that people should stay on top of. And we believe that microsatellite instability and tumor mutational burden are two of those things. So thanks for doing such a great job in explaining those, Dr. Reddy.
Thank you, Joy. It's great being here.
Well, we hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions about this or anything else, if we can support you in any way, we are survivors helping patients, and you can reach us at info@surviveit.org. Until next time, stay strong and live fearless.